I'm sorry, Jade, but there's no future for us." His voice landed on the table like a cold blade, sharp and certain, and before she could gather a single word in her defense, he stood up, smoothed his jacket, and brushed imaginary dust from his sleeve, as if wiping away the last few minutes of his life. Jade Williams blinked, stunned. No future. Funny how that word always comes back to me, she thought, tasting the old familiar bitterness of disappointment. She let out a crooked half-smile, one that wasn't joy or sarcasm but the instinctive expression of a woman who had learned to make pain look palatable in public. She glanced at the untouched wine glasses between them, their rims still glistening in the warm lights of North Star Bistro, and for a brief, almost cruel moment, she imagined a different scene, a family gathered around a table, warm, steady laughter, a child tugging at her sleeve, the kind of future she'd once dared to believe in. "Well," she murmured to the empty chair across from her, "Merry Christmas to you too." At the next table, a pair of white-haired women whispered far too loudly to be considered polite. "I knew he wouldn't stay long," one muttered. "Look at her. Poor thing." Then the other added, with a sniff of disapproval, "At least she didn't get stuck with one of those black boys tonight. Imagine the drama on Christmas." Jade's jaw tightened. She wasn't a confrontational person by nature, but injustice, especially the casual, unthinking kind, always lit something in her chest. Not anger. Not exactly. More like a deep, aching disappointment in the world. "And people wonder why so many kids in my school feel like they don't belong," she thought. The server approached, a young man with forced sympathy in his smile. "Miss, would you like to move to a different section? Maybe somewhere quieter? Away from, certain groups." His eyes flicked briefly toward the far corner of the restaurant, where a father and a young black girl sat enjoying hot chocolate. Jade's heart sank a little lower. Discomfort she could ignore. Insults she could swallow if she had to. But discrimination, direct or implied, always hit her in a way that bruised invisible parts of her spirit. "No," Jade said calmly. "I'll stay here." The server blinked at her firmness, nodded, and stepped away. Snow tapped lightly against the window beside her, small white flecks melting into trails. Boston winters always carried a certain kind of loneliness, but tonight it pressed against her ribs more tightly than usual. She took a breath, steady, practical, the way she always did when life asked her to be stronger than she felt. She reached for her bag, preparing to leave, when a tiny voice appeared at her elbow. "Miss, are you sad?" Jade turned and saw a little girl, 7, maybe 8, skin dark as polished mahogany, curls bouncing around her face, wearing a sparkly silver dress that glittered in the low restaurant light. The girl's big brown eyes were full of curiosity, not pity. Jade forced a gentle smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a long night." Before the girl could respond, a deep, steady voice came from behind her. "Zoe, honey, give the lady some space." Jade looked up, and there he was, the father from the corner table. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, posture quiet but confident, wearing a simple dark sweater that couldn't hide the strength beneath it. His eyes, warm and observant, held the kind of depth that comes from losing something or someone important. "I'm sorry," he said, giving Jade a respectful nod. "My daughter doesn't always understand boundaries." "I don't understand boundaries," Zoe repeated proudly, and her father gave her the kind of look that every child recognizes as "that's not something to brag about, sweetheart." Jade chuckled despite herself. "It's all right. She's sweet." The father's lips curved into a soft, sincere smile. "I'm Eric. This curious one is Zoe." "Jade," she replied. "It's nice to meet you both." Zoe tugged her father's hand. "Daddy, she looks like she needs hot chocolate." Eric chuckled. "Subtle as always, kiddo." Then he turned back to Jade. "If you don't want to spend Christmas dinner alone, you're welcome to join us. No pressure. No assumptions." Jade's heart warmed at the offer, but also tightened. She'd just been rejected. She was not about to wander to a stranger's table looking desperate. "That's kind, but I'm all right," she said politely. Eric nodded with complete understanding. Of course. Just then, a soft voice came from behind the bar. Mrs. Porter, the elderly black woman who managed the bistro and had worked there for 30 years. Baby, she called to Jade, rocking gently on her heels. Don't let somebody else's ignorance choose how your Christmas ends. Jade blinked, caught off guard by the tender firmness in the woman's words. You deserve to sit somewhere you feel welcome, Mrs. Porter continued. Some folks just don't know how to treat people right. Zoe lit up and seized Jade's sleeve with her tiny fingers. See? You should come sit with us. Jade's chest tightened in that fragile space between fear and longing. One dinner, she told herself. Just one, and then I'll go back to my life. She took a breath, exhaled slowly, and met Eric's steady gaze. Is the offer still open? His answer was immediate and gentle. Always. And for the first time that night, Jade felt something she hadn't felt in a long while. Something warm and cautious and terrifying. Possibility. She followed them toward the corner table, the lights above drifting in soft gold glimmers, the hum of holiday chatter fading behind her. 2 hours earlier, a stranger had told her she had no future. Yet as she sat down across from Eric and beside a beaming little girl in a silver dress, Jade felt the strange, unmistakable sensation that something new, something fragile and hopeful had just begun. Whether it was fate or coincidence or simply a moment of kindness in a world that desperately needed more of it, she didn't know. But as Zoe slid a cup of hot chocolate toward her, and Eric offered a quiet, grounding smile, Jade realized one thing with absolute clarity. Tonight, for the first time in years, she was not alone. Jade hadn't realized how cold her fingers were until they curled around the warm mug Zoe pushed toward her. The scent of cocoa rich, sweet, familiar rose in a comforting cloud, the kind that once filled her childhood kitchen on snowy mornings. She offered the little girl a grateful smile. Thank you, Zoe. You looked like you needed it, Zoe replied, very matter of fact, swinging her legs under the chair. Hot chocolate fixes everything. Daddy says so. Eric raised an eyebrow. I said it helps, not that it performs miracles. Same thing, Zoe insisted. Jade laughed softly. The sound surprised her. It felt lighter than anything that had come out of her mouth in months. Maybe years. Eric's presence, steady and grounded, helped. He wasn't trying to charm her. He wasn't performing. He wasn't asking anything. Just sitting there, creating space for her to breathe. She found herself studying the lines of his face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the calm strength in his posture. So, Eric said gently, did your evening not go as planned? Jade let out a breath that was half sigh, half humor. If the plan was emotional catastrophe wrapped in a side of humiliation, then yes, perfect success. Zoe gasped like she'd heard a secret. Was it the man in the fancy jacket? He walked out really fast. He didn't even finish his bread. Daddy says people who don't finish their bread can't be trusted. I do not say that, Eric murmured. Yes, you do, Zoe insisted. Last week you said Mr. Cullen from upstairs was suspicious because he never finishes his garlic rolls. Eric covered his face with one hand. Zoe. Jade laughed again, warm despite herself. Well, your dad may be onto something. Zoe looked proud to have contributed to the investigation. The restaurant hummed around them, families clinking glasses, couples leaning close, snippets of old Christmas melodies floating through the warm air. Snow tapped a soft rhythm against the windows, the world outside fading into a blur of white light. Inside this small corner booth, Jade felt something unfamiliar. Safety. Eric waited patiently for her to continue, but didn't press. She appreciated that more than he could know. It wasn't a big deal, Jade said finally. Just a mismatched expectation. He decided there was no future for us before we even got to the appetizer. That was a very fast decision, Eric said. His tone held no pity, just observation, steady and honest. Yeah, Jade replied. You could say he's efficient. Zoe wrinkled her nose. He sounds mean. Before Jade could respond, someone at the table behind them muttered, "Is she really sitting with them?" The words were low, barely audible, but not low enough. Jade felt Eric stiffen almost imperceptibly. Zoe's shoulders tensed. The air around them shifted, like a tiny, unwelcome storm cloud drifting over their table. Jade glanced behind her, catching the half-hidden look from a middle-aged man in a red sweater. His expression held the kind of casual superiority she'd seen too often at her school, when certain parents assumed their children were more deserving than the kids she defended. She met his gaze for a beat too long, and he looked away. Jade turned back, pulse steady. "Ignore it," she said quietly. Eric gave a slow nod, though she sensed the weight he carried behind that composure. Zoe looked between them with worried eyes. "Did we do something wrong?" Jade shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart. Some people just don't understand kindness when they see it." Zoe processed that for a moment, then nodded as if she had decided to forgive the entire world. "Daddy says people who don't understand kindness need more kindness." "I did say that," Eric admitted, smiling softly. That smile lingered, spreading a warmth across Jade's chest she didn't expect. She sipped her cocoa, letting it melt some of the day's sharp edges. "So," Jade said, shifting the conversation, "are you two celebrating something special tonight?" Zoe perked up instantly. "Yes," Daddy said, "we're celebrating making it through the year. That's what grown-ups say when they don't have cake but want to make it sound important." Eric looked amused. "It's a small tradition. We try to do something special each Christmas Eve. Just the two of us." Jade noticed a flicker of something in his voice. Loss. A shadow of an old wound. She didn't ask, but she filed it gently in the quiet corner of her heart where she held space for other people's pain. "Well," Jade said softly, "thank you for sharing part of your tradition with me." Zoe grinned. "Daddy only shares with people he likes." "Zoe," Eric warned gently. "What?" "It's true." Jade felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't sure when a 7-year-old's approval became the most valuable gift of the evening, but here she was, accepting it wholeheartedly. A few minutes passed in easy conversation about Zoe's favorite holiday movies, about Jade's work at the school, about Eric's attempts to learn how to braid his daughter's hair through hours of painful YouTube tutorials. The booth grew cozier by the minute. The noise of the bistro faded. Time slowed, the way it sometimes does moments before something meaningful begins. At one point, Jade caught herself glancing at Eric more than strictly necessary. He saw her once, but didn't hold the gaze, just offered a quiet, knowing smile. And for reasons she didn't yet understand, that felt like the safest way to be seen. Eventually, Zoe declared she needed the bathroom, and Eric guided her through the maze of tables. Jade watched them go, Zoe chatting animatedly, Eric leaning down to listen. Something about the two of them together tugged at her chest, soft and deep. When the server approached for their booth, Jade instinctively straightened, prepared for awkwardness or some lingering hint of bias. But instead, the young man cleared his throat and said quietly, "Ma'am, I'm sorry for earlier." Jade blinked. "Earlier? I shouldn't have suggested you move tables," he said, cheeks flushed. "Mrs. Porter talked to me. She said, I need to listen better, and to understand people better." A small, surprised smile tugged at Jade's lips. "Thank you. I appreciate that." He nodded and slipped away. Jade watched him go, thinking of Mrs. Porter, the way she carried authority without raising her voice, the way she saw through people with a clarity Jade admired. Snow drifted outside, catching the soft glow of streetlights. Christmas Eve, a night meant for warmth, belonging, family, and somehow, against all logic, she wasn't ending the night in solitude. She was ending it with two strangers who didn't feel like strangers anymore. Eric and Zoe returned, Zoe humming a carol, Eric brushing a snowflake from his daughter's hair. He slid back into his seat and looked at Jade with quiet sincerity. "We're glad you stayed." For the first time all night, Jade didn't have to force her smile. "Me too." And as they settled into their imperfect, unexpected little trio. Jade felt it, something fragile and promising stirring beneath the surface. Not quite love. Not yet. But the earliest echo of a future she'd been told she would never have. A future that, somehow, she felt closer to tonight than ever before. The dinner plates had been cleared, replaced by steaming peppermint tea and the glow of a tiny candle flickering between them. The restaurant had thinned out families heading home to open presents, couples leaving hand in hand into the snowy Boston night. Yet, at their little corner booth, Jade felt no urge to stand. No sense that time was slipping by. If anything, the moment stretched warm and unhurried, as if the world outside had slowed just enough to let her breathe again. Zoe was in the middle of describing, with absolute seriousness, her plan to train a snowman army. "They'll guard our house," she explained, stirring her tea with dedication. "But only if Daddy stops using carrots that look like sad noses." Eric pressed a palm to his forehead. "I didn't know carrots could have emotions." "Of course they do," Zoe insisted. "Some carrots want to be noses and some want to be soup. You have to listen. You hear that, Jade?" Eric said. "I've been failing to listen to carrots properly." "Shame on you," Jade replied lightly. "A truly responsible adult should always be in tune with produce." Zoe nodded vigorously. "Exactly," Eric shook his head, but Jade saw the fond amusement in his eyes. The warmth of a father who carried his daughter's world like a fragile treasure. That moved her more than she expected. She wrapped her hands around her teacup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. For a while, the three of them simply sat like that, talking about nothing and everything. The kind of meandering conversation that only happens when no one is pretending to be anything other than themselves. Eventually, Zoe leaned sideways and whispered loudly, "Daddy, I'm getting sleepy." "Of course you are," Eric murmured, brushing a curl from her forehead. He turned to Jade. "It's getting late. We should probably get this little one home." Jade nodded, though a quiet ache bloomed in her chest at the thought of the night ending. "Thank you," she said. "Really, you two saved my Christmas Eve." Eric gave her a warm, serious look. "I'm glad we ran into you." "Me too," Zoe chimed in, already gathering her sparkly coat. As they stood, Jade slipped her own scarf around her neck, suddenly unsure how to say goodbye without sounding awkward. She didn't want to linger too long, but she also didn't want this moment to vanish like the steam drifting from her tea. Outside the restaurant, a soft curtain of snow fell in big, lazy flakes. The streetlights cast halos around each one, turning the sidewalk into something out of a holiday postcard. Eric zipped Zoe's coat, adjusting her hat with gentle hands. Jade watched him with a softness she didn't try to hide. "Do you live far?" she asked. "Not too far," Eric replied. 10-minute drive. "And you?" "About 15 minutes, she answered. "Back Bay area." He nodded, genuinely listening, as if committing the information to memory. Then an odd quietness settled between them, a gentle stillness, almost like the pause before the first note of a song. Zoe broke it by taking Jade's glove-clad hand. "Thank you for sitting with us," she said. "Some people at the restaurant looked funny, but Daddy says funny looks don't mean anything unless we believe them." Jade's throat tightened. "Your daddy is a very wise man." "He is," Zoe declared, "except about carrots. But he tries." Eric covered a laugh. Okay, we're never escaping the carrot thing." Jade smiled at them, this perfectly imperfect duo, and felt an emotion she couldn't quite name. Something like longing, but softer. Something like recognition, as if her heart had briefly remembered what it was like to belong. Eric cleared his throat. "Can I walk you to your car?" Jade hesitated, not out of fear, but out of sudden shyness. "Sure," she said finally. "If you don't mind," I offered. Didn't I? His tone was light, but there was a sincerity beneath it. They walked together, Zoe hopping between footprints, singing a slightly off-key version of Silent Night. The snow crunched under their boots, the kind of sound that felt both nostalgic and soothing. Jade breathed in the cold night air, feeling strangely alive. When they reached her car, a little silver sedan dusted in snow, she turned to them with genuine gratitude. "Thank you again," she said softly, "for the company and the kindness." Eric's eyes held hers. "Anytime." Zoe tugged her father's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, can I give her a hug?" Jade's heart stuttered. Eric nodded. "If she says it's okay." Zoe looked up. "Can I?" Jade knelt down in the snow, arms open, the little girl wrapped around her neck without hesitation, warm, trusting, impossibly sweet. The hug wasn't long, but the imprint it left was. When Zoe pulled back, she whispered, "You smell like cookies." Jade laughed. "Best compliment I've gotten today." She stood, brushing snow from her coat, and met Eric's gaze again. "Merry Christmas, Eric." "Merry Christmas, Jade." He paused, then added softly, "I hope this isn't the last time we see you." A flutter moved through her, unexpected, thrilling. "I hope not either." She got into her car, started the engine, and watched them walk away, Zoe swinging her father's hand, Eric occasionally glancing back over his shoulder. When they disappeared into the snowfall, Jade sat in silence for a long moment. The world outside was cold and vast, but something inside her felt steady and warm. She touched the place on her shoulder where Zoe's hug still lingered and whispered into the quiet, "Maybe there is a future. Maybe it just doesn't look like I expected." As she drove away, the falling snow blurred the traffic lights into soft halos, and the streets of Boston glowed with the magic of a night that had gently, irrevocably changed the direction of her heart. 2 days passed, and Boston settled into the quiet lull between Christmas and New Year's. The snow hadn't melted. It simply softened, forming gentle drifts along sidewalks and park benches. Life moved on, people returned to work, stores reopened, but for Jade, something subtle in her had shifted since that Christmas Eve dinner. She kept replaying small moments. Zoe's bright eyes, Eric's steady voice, the way their laughter blended into a sound that felt like home, even though she'd only just met them. She didn't expect to see them again, but she hoped. And sometimes, in a city as big and chaotic as Boston, hope behaved strangely. On a chilly Thursday afternoon, Jade found herself shepherding her group of fourth graders through Boston Common for their post-holiday nature. Walk-a-school tradition meant to get kids outside and let teachers pretend they were science educators for 1 hour. She tugged her scarf closer, counting heads for the 5th time. "Stay together, everyone. Remember, snow is slippery, and I don't want to lose any of you to a snowbank." "Miss Williams," a girl shouted. "Danny ate snow again." Jade sighed. "Danny, we've talked about this. We do not eat nature unless nature is officially approved by the cafeteria." As she walked toward him, a familiar voice called from behind her, warm and slightly amused. "Miss Williams has a lot of rules, doesn't she?" Jade froze. She knew that voice. She turned, and there they were. Eric stood in the bright winter sunlight, hands tucked into his coat pockets, while Zoe ran ahead of him, curls bouncing like she was powered by her own personal joy generator. "Hey, Daddy, look! It is Miss Jade," Zoe squealed, launching herself forward like a happy comet. "She looks so pretty today." Jade felt her face warm instantly. She hadn't picked her outfit for anyone, just a green sweater, pea coat, and boots, but hearing it from Zoe made the cold day somehow glow. "Well, hello there," Jade said, laughing as Zoe hugged her legs. "You two out enjoying the snow?" "Trying to," Eric replied. "We were on our way to feed the ducks, but someone insisted on taking the long route." Zoe lifted her hand high. "I'm someone." Jade's students had stopped to stare. One boy whispered, "Miss Williams knows people?" Another said, "That little girl is sparkly. Can she be in our group?" Jade rubbed her forehead. "Everyone, take 5 minutes to explore this area. No eating snow. Danny, that means you." The kids scattered. Jade turned back to Eric. "I didn't expect to run into you. Boston's got a funny sense of timing," he said. Or maybe Zoe's snowman army is guiding us. Zoe gasped. Miss Jade, I started training them yesterday. Daddy says they're not ready for battle, but I think they're doing great. She made one that looks like me, Eric said dryly. It had a twig beard. Because you won't grow a real one, Zoe countered. Jade stifled a laugh. Watching them felt like watching sunlight, warm, frozen ground. Something about their energy, soft, chaotic, full of love, pulled her closer without permission. How was your Christmas? Jade asked. Quiet, Eric said. Good. Better than last year. The shadow in his eyes was brief, but real. Jade noticed it, the way she'd noticed it at the restaurant. She didn't pry. She simply nodded, offering silent understanding. And yours? He asked. Unexpected, she answered truthfully. She caught his gaze and held it for a beat too long. Zoe, oblivious to adult subtleties, tugged Jade's hand. Can you come feed the ducks with us? Please? I can't, Jade said softly. I'm working. But it's duck time, Zoe argued. Even teachers need duck time. Eric chuckled. She makes a compelling argument. Jade's heart fluttered at his smile. I would love to, but I can't abandon my students. Their parents would have questions. Zoe looked at the group of kids, who were currently throwing snowballs at a tree. They look okay. Jade shook her head firmly. No. Zoe groaned theatrically. Grown-ups always say no to fun. Eric crouched to her level. Hey, we talked about this. Miss Jade has responsibilities. You know, like homework, but harder. Zoe folded her arms. I knew being a grown-up was a trap. Jade snorted. It is. Don't fall for it. Eric stood again, and for a moment, the three of them simply stood together, like the world had paused to frame them in one quiet, perfect picture. We should let you get back to your class, Eric said. Just wanted to say hi. Jade nodded, though something in her chest tugged as if unwilling to let the moment go. She watched them start to walk away, Zoe skipping ahead, Eric following behind with that patient, steady stride. Then, like a child possessed by sudden inspiration, Zoe spun around and shouted, Miss Jade, will you come to my school show tomorrow? School show? Jade echoed. The winter showcase, Eric explained. She's singing, and dancing, and other things I'm not allowed to talk about until opening night. It's amazing, Zoe declared. There's glitter and everything. Jade laughed. When is it? Tomorrow at 5:30, Eric said. No pressure, but you're welcome. That tug in her chest pulled harder. She couldn't ignore it. Not the warmth, not the connection, not the unspoken invitation woven into Eric's voice. I'll try to come, Jade said. Zoe cheered so loudly that several fourth graders turned to look. Okay, Jade called to her class. Everyone, group up. Time to head back. The students groaned but obeyed. As they gathered, Jade turned back one last time. Eric raised a hand in a quiet wave. Jade returned it. Then she led her students away through the snowy park, her heart unexpectedly full. But fate wasn't quite done with her yet. The next day, as Jade walked through the halls of her school, papers tucked under her arm, coffee in her hand, she spotted a familiar set of curls bobbing near the front office. Miss Jade, Zoe shouted, running toward her. Jade blinked. Zoe? What are you doing here? Eric appeared behind her, slightly out of breath. There you are. Slow down, sweetheart. Daddy came to sign my form for the showcase, Zoe said. And I saw your coat. I told Daddy I could smell your cookies smell from the hallway. Jade felt her cheeks warm again. Well, this is a surprise. A good one, I hope? Eric asked. Jade held his gaze, feeling that same strange, warm certainty she'd felt on Christmas Eve. Yeah, she said softly. A very good one. Zoe jumped up and down. Miss Jade is coming tonight. I told everyone. Zoe, Eric said with a sigh. We talked about not announcing things before someone confirms, but she did confirm. Zoe insisted. She said she'll try, and trying is almost confirming. Eric rubbed his temples. "You exhaust me." "Thank you," Zoe said proudly. Jade laughed again, third time that morning, and it wasn't even 9 a.m. The bell rang, echoing down the hallway. "I have to get to class," Jade said. "But I'll see what I can do." "We'll save you a seat," Eric said, quiet but certain. And just like that, Jade felt something shift inside her. A click, a gentle turning of gears she didn't know were still capable of moving. A future she hadn't dared to imagine had begun taking shape, not through grand gestures, but through small, unexpected moments. Moments full of warmth, laughter, possibility, the kind that felt like the start of something real. And as she walked toward her classroom, Jade realized she was smiling again, without forcing it, without guarding it, without fear. A smile born from hope, soft, steady, and utterly new. The winter showcase was livelier than Jade expected. The gymnasium had been transformed with strings of blue and white lights, folding chairs arranged in neat rows, and a small stage decorated with paper snowflakes clearly cut out by tiny, uneven hands. Parents filled the room in heavy coats, shaking off the cold while exchanging polite holiday greetings. But under the surface, there was an unmistakable hum, a mix of excitement, judgment, pride, and the subtle tension that always crept into gatherings of adults, pretending they weren't comparing themselves to each other. Jade slipped into the back row, still unsure if she should have come. It wasn't that she didn't want to support Zoe, she did, fiercely. But she wasn't prepared for the eyes that drifted toward her the moment she entered, some curious, some surprised, and a few carrying the heavy weight of unspoken assumptions. She kept her chin up anyway. She was a teacher here. She belonged, or so she tried to convince herself. Then, through the crowd, she spotted Eric. He was adjusting his scarf, looking around with quiet anticipation, and when his eyes met hers, something warm flickered in them, like he hadn't fully believed she would come until this moment. He threaded his way through the chairs until he reached her. "Hey," he said softly, smiling. "You made it." "I did. I had to fight 3 parents who wanted last-minute conferences, but I'm here." "Worth the battle?" he asked. Jade's lips curved. "Definitely." Eric glanced at the seat beside her. "Is this taken?" "No. It's yours." He sat, and Jade felt an unexpected comfort settle into the space between them. Not romance, something quieter, deeper, the early root of trust gently pushing through the soil. On stage, the principal welcomed everyone, her microphone squealing before settling. Kids filed onto the steps in holiday sweaters, parents raised phones like paparazzi, and then the music began. Zoe was on the top row, glittery bow shining under the lights, waving wildly when she spotted Jade, and ignoring the teacher trying to make the kids stand still. "She's excited you're here," Eric murmured. "I can tell. She's very expressive," Jade whispered. "Always has been," he said proudly. "She gets that from her mom." Jade nodded gently, feeling the weight of that sentence. A part of her wondered, not for the first time, how much grief lived behind Eric's steady exterior. The first song started slightly off-key but enthusiastic, and Jade clapped because Zoe clapped, because Eric did, because the whole gymnasium did. For a while, the world felt simple, kids singing, parents smiling, snow drifting outside. Then, in the row ahead, 2 women leaned toward each other. Their voices weren't exactly loud, but they carried. "Is that her, the teacher from Back Bay?" "Mm-hmm. I heard she's been spending time with that black guy, the one whose wife passed." "Oh, that's her? I thought she'd be, I don't know, younger, or more his type." A quiet laugh. "Well, you know how some women get. 30-something, unmarried. They start collecting hobbies. Even men? Especially men with baggage." Jade stiffened. The phrase hung in the air like a sour smell. Eric didn't react, didn't look at the women, didn't tense visibly, but Jade felt his silence like a bruise forming beneath the surface. She hated the way it made her chest tighten, not because the words were about her, but because they were rooted in the same kind of thinking that had been thrown at Eric 1,000 times before. She leaned slightly toward him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Eric shook his head. "Don't be. You shouldn't have to hear that." "I have, for years," he said, low. "But Zoe, she doesn't need to." Jade swallowed tightly. For the rest of the performance, she found herself watching Zoe more intently, cheering louder, clapping harder because the joy on that little girl's face felt like the antidote to all the poison whispered in the world. After the final number, the audience erupted in applause. Kids hopped off the stage in chaotic waves, parents pushing forward to collect them. Zoe barreled straight toward Jade before Eric could take a step. Miss Jade, did you see me?" I sang so loud my voice almost broke. Jade knelt to hug her. "You were perfect," she said, and meant it. "I was sparkly." "Extremely sparkly," Jade agreed. Zoe squeezed her tightly. "I'm so glad you came." Eric reached them, tugging Zoe's coat into place. "Say thank you to Miss Jade for coming all the way here after work." "Thank you, Miss Jade," Zoe chirped, then looked up expectantly. "Can she come get ice cream with us?" Jade blinked. Eric chuckled softly. "Slow down, Zoe. Miss Jade might have plans." Jade didn't, and the way Zoe's face practically glowed with hope made the answer too easy. "Ice cream sounds great," Jade said. Zoe squealed in triumph. "Yes, Daddy," she said. "Yes." "It appears she did," Eric said, amused. They stepped into the snowy parking lot together, Zoe bouncing ahead of them while Eric and Jade stayed a few steps back. "You sure you're up for this?" Eric asked, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Ice cream in winter is an intense commitment." "I can handle cold," Jade replied. "That's not what I meant." Jade looked at him, the weight behind his words settling over her. He wasn't talking about temperature, he was talking about visibility, about being seen together, about the murmurs in the gym, the glances, the mixed-race pairing people would question before they questioned their own prejudice. Jade's answer came without hesitation. "I'm not worried about what people think." Eric studied her for a moment, searching for cracks, for uncertainty. When he found none, something in his shoulders eased. "All right then," he said, voice warm. "Ice cream it is." They walked under the soft glow of street lights, Zoe skipping in front of them, leaving tiny boot prints in the fresh snow. And though they were only 3 people crossing a parking lot on an ordinary winter evening, Jade felt something unmistakable taking shape, something fragile but steady, like the beginning of a bridge being built plank by plank between 3 hearts, slowly learning they might belong together. A small family forming in the quiet, not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by kindness, by courage, and by the stubborn, hopeful belief that sometimes, even in a world full of whispered judgments, people could choose love anyway. Zoe fell asleep in the back seat before they even finished their ice cream. One gloved hand still wrapped around the empty cup like she intended to protect it through the night. Eric glanced at her in the rearview mirror, smiling with the soft, quiet affection Jade had begun to recognize as the center of who he was. "She had a big night," Jade whispered, watching Zoe's head tilt against the seatbelt. "She did," Eric replied. "She's been practicing that routine since October. Our living room hasn't recovered." "Worth it," Jade said. She was incredible. They shared a glance warm, grateful, lingering just a second too long. Jade looked out the window to steady herself. They had parked outside Jade's apartment building so Eric could drive her home after ice cream. Snow flurried gently under the yellow street lamp. It was later than Jade had realized, later than she'd ever stayed out on a school night. But it didn't feel late. It felt right. "Thank you," she said finally, her breath fogging the glass for a moment. "For tonight. It meant a lot to me." Eric shifted, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. "I should be thanking you. Zoe hasn't stopped smiling since she saw you walk into that gym." Jade felt warmth rise through her chest. "She's easy to love," Jade murmured. And then she froze, because the words slipped out too naturally, too honestly. Eric looked at her, and something in his eyes softened, not surprise, but understanding. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She is." A beat passed. Jade wondered if she should open the door, end the night cleanly, keep a safe distance. But before she could move, Eric reached for something in the console. "She made this," he said, placing a folded piece of thick construction paper into Jade's hands. "This afternoon. She wanted to give it to you after the show." Jade smiled, unfolding the paper slowly, and the breath left her lungs. It was a drawing done in crayon, full of imperfect lines and bright, determined colors. 3 figures stood in a row, hand in hand. Zoe on the left, her sparkly bow drawn way too large, Eric on the right, tall and smiling, and between them, "That's you," Eric said gently. Jade's throat tightened. She touched the crayon figure, the one with the long hair, the green sweater, the big smile, the one Zoe had placed right between her and her father. But it was the back of the drawing that undid her. In uneven handwriting, Zoe had written, "My new family." Jade inhaled sharply. The words weren't casual. They weren't childlike fantasy. They were heartbreakingly sincere. "Eric," she whispered. She shouldn't think." "I know," he said quickly, his voice low. "She gets attached fast. Faster than she should. I've been trying to teach her patience, but—" He exhaled. "When she likes someone, she just loves them. Completely." Jade couldn't speak for a moment. Her chest was tight, her pulse loud in her ears. She folded the drawing carefully and held it against her lap. "I don't want to hurt her," she said quietly. "I know," Eric replied. "You won't. You've been nothing but good to her." Jade swallowed. "I can't promise things I can't keep." "I'm not asking you to," Eric said. "Not now, not ever. I just wanted you to see what she sees." His voice wavered, not with fear, but with something deeper. Vulnerability. Trust. Jade placed the drawing gently on the dashboard, hands steady but heart trembling. "What about you?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "What do you see?" Eric leaned back in his seat, eyes settling on her like he'd been avoiding this moment and wanting it at the same time. "I see someone kind," he said, "someone patient. Someone who looks at Zoe like she's more than just a cute kid passing by." Her breath caught. "I see someone I'm starting to care about." A soft sound escaped her, a half laugh, half sigh. "Eric." "I'm not rushing anything," he said quickly. "God knows I'm not ready for anything fast. I'm just—" He searched for the right words. "I'm grateful you walked into that restaurant on Christmas Eve." She felt the impact of that sentence all the way down to her bones. "Me too," she whispered. Another long, delicate moment hung between them. Zoe snored softly in the back seat. Snowflakes drifted past the windshield, tiny glowing specks in the streetlight. "I should let you go," Eric said finally. "It's late." But neither of them moved. It was Jade who broke the stillness first, reaching for the door handle. "Good night," she said softly. "Good night, Jade." She stepped out, boots crunching in the fresh snow. Eric rolled down the window. "Text me when you get inside." "I will." She meant it. She walked toward her building, feeling him watch to make sure she didn't slip. She turned briefly and waved. He lifted his hand in return, that same quiet smile she had begun to crave already. Inside her apartment, Jade leaned against the closed door, breath trembling, heart full. She removed her scarf with slow fingers, the sound of the car engine still echoing in her mind. Then she pulled the folded drawing from her coat pocket. She placed it on the kitchen counter, stared at it. One father, one daughter, one woman with a green sweater. My new family. Jade pressed her fingertips to the paper, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the thing she had been afraid to name, hope. But hope came with fear too, fear of hurting Zoe, of not being enough, of misreading the warmth in Eric's eyes, fear of letting her heart open again. She exhaled shakily. "Don't get ahead of yourself," she whispered to the empty apartment. But as she walked to her bedroom and turned off the lights, one truth lingered stubbornly, quietly, beautifully. This was no longer just a simple connection. It was becoming something deeper, and the drawing, innocent, colorful, painfully sincere, had changed everything. In ways Jade wasn't ready for, in ways she couldn't stop, and in ways that would soon test them all. The community center sat at the edge of Roxbury, a brick building with a history longer than most of the people inside it. Every December, it hosted the Cole family winter fundraiser, an event Eric's mother had started decades ago to help local families through the cold months. Tonight, the parking lot was full, the windows glowing with warm yellow light, and the sound of music spilled out every time the door opened. Jade hesitated at the entrance, smoothing the front of her coat. She wasn't sure why her heart was beating so fast. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. More like stepping into a world she desperately wanted to belong to, while knowing she had no map for it. She'd grown up in a very different Boston, quieter, whiter, shielded. This community center felt alive, vibrant, rooted in shared history and culture, and she was walking into it alone. But Eric had invited her. "If you're comfortable," he'd said, "I'd like you there." Zoe would too. That had been enough. She pushed the door open. Warmth enveloped her immediately, both the physical heat and the energy inside. People mingled beside tables of homemade food. A jazz trio played on a small stage. Children ran between adults carrying plates of cornbread and baked mac and cheese. Jade scanned the room until she saw a familiar sparkle. Miss Jade. Zoe barreled toward her in a red dress, glitter somehow already on her cheeks. Jade opened her arms just in time. "Hi, sweetheart," she laughed, lifting her a little. "You look very festive. Daddy said I could wear red because it's a power color," Zoe announced proudly. "He said it shows confidence." "It definitely does." "Come on." Zoe grabbed Jade's hand. "Daddy's talking to people, but he said he'd keep an eye out for you. I found you first, so I win." Jade let herself be pulled through the crowd. People nodded politely. Some smiled. Some appraised her with the sharp curiosity of a neighborhood that noticed everything. But the warmth was undeniable. And then she saw him. Eric stood near the donation table, speaking with an older man. But the moment he saw Jade, his entire expression softened, like a tense muscle unclenching. He excused himself and walked toward her. "You made it," he said, voice warm, relieved in a way he didn't bother hiding. "Wouldn't miss it," Jade replied. He looked good, better than good, in a charcoal sweater and rolled sleeves, the kind of effortless neatness that still carried an undercurrent of quiet strength. "Let me give you the tour," he said, gesturing around them. Zoe tugged both their hands. "I'll do it. I'm a better tour guide than Daddy. Daddy uses too many words." Eric sighed. "She's not wrong." They moved through the room together, Zoe skipping ahead, Jade and Eric following behind. He explained the history of the fundraiser, the programs it supported, the community they tried to lift up. Jade listened closely, feeling something expand inside her as she heard the pride woven through his voice. "Your family built something really meaningful here," she said softly. Eric's eyes warmed. "My mom led the charge. She believed a neighborhood should lift its own." Jade smiled. "She sounds incredible." "She is," he said. "She'll be here soon. She's excited to meet you." Jade nearly tripped. "Meet me? Zoe told her about you." "Oh God." Eric chuckled. "She's very literal. And very enthusiastic." Jade rubbed her forehead. "What exactly did she say? That you're nice, you smell like cookies, and you saved Christmas?" Jade groaned. "Wonderful. That won't create any expectations at all." Eric's laugh was quiet, but it slid warm into her chest. They reached the food tables, filled with dishes clearly made by different hands, different homes, different histories. Jade admired the spread. "Everything looks amazing." "Grab a plate," Eric said. "You should try Mrs. Brooks' sweet potato pie or she'll hunt me down." Jade took a plate, but before she could move, she heard it soft, cutting, and very close behind her. "So that's her? The new one?" "Mm-hmm." Didn't think she'd show up here. Well, you know how it is. Some white women want a project. Single black dad? Looks good on paper. She won't last. They never do. Jade froze. The words seeped under her skin like ice water. Eric heard it too. She saw the way his jaw tightened, just barely. He turned his body slightly toward Jade, not to hide her, but to anchor her. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice so low only she could hear. "Don't apologize," she whispered. "They don't know me." "They think they do," he said. "People decide fast, too fast." Jade steadied herself because she felt the sting, not from the insult itself, but from what it represented. She wanted to belong here. She wanted to stand beside Eric and Zoe. But acceptance wasn't guaranteed. And prejudice, she realized, didn't only travel one direction. Zoe returned with a cookie in each hand, utterly oblivious. "Miss Jade, Daddy said you need to try the mac and cheese. It's legendary." Jade resettled her smile, smoothing the crack in her heart so Zoe would never see it. "Then I definitely need to try it." Zoe placed a cookie on her plate proudly. "I brought you this. It's shaped like a star but also like a blob." "The perfect combination," Jade said. Eric watched her closely, too closely. He knew she was hurt. She knew he knew. But neither of them said anything because Zoe was there, shining like a Christmas light, holding the room together with pure innocence. As they sat at a table to eat, Jade noticed more glances, not all unfriendly, but curious, questioning. She wasn't used to being the outsider. She wasn't used to being the one people whispered about. She wasn't used to representing something bigger than herself. It made her chest tighten. "You okay?" Eric asked quietly. She nodded. "Just knew. If it gets overwhelming, we can leave." "No," she said quickly. "I want to be here." Eric exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Good. I'm glad." They ate, talked, laughed. Slowly, the whispers around them softened, curiosity fading into acceptance as people saw the way Zoe leaned into Jade's side, the way Jade wiped crumbs from her cheek, the way Eric looked at her as if she'd been part of this world longer than a handful of days. Then, near the end of the night, a burst of applause rose from the front of the room. Eric's mother entered, Grace Cole-Regal, composed, silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp enough to read a room with one sweep. "Daddy," Zoe whispered dramatically. "Grandma has arrived." "So she has," Eric murmured. Grace spotted them, and her gaze landed directly on Jade, not judging, not cold, assessing, curious. Eric stood. "Come on," he said softly. "Time to meet the woman who started the Cole legacy." Jade's stomach fluttered, not with nerves, something deeper, something like the weight of a door about to open. A door that, once crossed, could change everything. And as she followed Eric and Zoe toward Grace Cole, Jade felt the shift, the moment where the fragile beginnings of connection would be tested, where she would have to prove without saying a word that she wasn't here as a project, a novelty, or an outsider. She was here because she cared. About Zoe, about Eric, about justice, about belonging. And step by step, as the room watched, Jade walked forward into the heart of their world. Grace Cole did not walk, she glided, moving through the community center with the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. She greeted everyone with a nod or a short embrace, her presence both comforting and commanding. Jade felt her pulse flutter as Grace approached, Zoe bouncing excitedly at her side. Eric placed a steady hand at Jade's back, a gesture light enough not to draw attention but strong enough to anchor her. Grace reached them, eyes sharpening first on Zoe, softening instantly. "There's my star," she said, kissing Zoe's forehead. "Did you behave tonight?" "Yes, Grandma. Mostly." Grace's eyebrows lifted. "Mostly?" "Miss Jade came too," Zoe added proudly. And just like that, the attention shifted. Grace turned to Jade fully. "So you're Jade," she said. Not unkindly, not warmly, simply, truthfully. Jade stood straighter. "Yes, ma'am. It's an honor to meet you." Grace didn't smile, but her eyes flickered like she was noting that Jade hadn't stumbled over her words or shrunk into herself. "I've heard quite a bit about you," Grace said. "Some from Zoe, some from Eric, some from the neighborhood." Jade nodded, meeting her gaze. "I'm sure not all of it was flattering." Grace huffed a single amused breath. "She's honest," she murmured to Eric, as if checking a box on an invisible list. Eric gave a small smile. "I told you." Over the next hour, Jade found herself pulled into conversations with neighbors, volunteers, and old friends of the Cole family. Grace stayed close enough to observe but not interfere. Zoe, energized beyond imagination, introduced Jade to nearly everyone. "This is Miss Jade. She teaches kids and smells like cookies, and she watched my winter show, and she's my friend." Each introduction broke down another wall. And yet not everyone was warm. Some smiles were thin, some questions too probing, some glances too long. A few older women whispered near the dessert table, "Another outsider. She won't last. Pretty girl, but she's not Lena." Lena. Jade had heard the name once, spoken quietly by Eric, wrapped in grief. She didn't know the whole story, but she knew enough to respect it. She felt the weight of it now, how much memory lived in this room, and she felt eyes measuring her against a ghost. The night went on, and Jade handled it all polite greetings, curious questions, moments of subtle doubt, with grace she didn't know she possessed. But the truth was, a small knot formed in her stomach, pulled tighter with every whisper she pretended not to hear. As the event tapered off, Eric carried boxes while Zoe helped fold chairs. Jade stayed near the food table, helping where she could. Grace approached again, this time without an audience. "You did well tonight," she said. Jade looked up, surprised. "Thank you. This community is protective," Grace continued. "Of history, of legacy, of Eric, of Zoe. Sometimes that protection looks like suspicion." Jade nodded slowly. "I noticed." Grace folded her hands. "Don't take it personally. I'm trying not to." Grace studied her a long moment. "But you care for them." Jade didn't flinch. "I do. Enough to stay." Jade hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because the truth was heavy. "I want to," she said. "But I don't want to cause harm. To anyone." Grace's gaze softened just slightly. "That's a good start." Before Jade could ask what she meant, Zoe rushed up and wrapped both arms around her waist. "Miss Jade, are you coming with us for hot cocoa?" Eric came up behind her. "Zoe, give her a minute," he said gently. "She might be tired." "I'm not tired," Jade said quickly, smiling down at Zoe. "But maybe just one cup." Zoe squealed. They helped clean the last tables, bundled into coats, and stepped into the fresh snow. The night was crisp, quiet, and glowing under the street lamps. Eric walked beside Jade while Zoe skipped ahead. "You did amazing tonight," he said softly. "Amazing?" Jade laughed. "I thought I held on by a thread." "You held your own," he replied. "That means something here." They walked toward the cars, breath forming little clouds. Jade felt an odd mix of pride and exhaustion. Her chest felt full, not heavy, but full. After a moment, Eric said, "I'm sorry for what you heard earlier." She looked at him. "You don't need to apologize for other people." "I know," he said, "but I hate that you had to hear it, that you had to feel it." Jade swallowed gently. "It wasn't new to me." Eric turned, surprised. "Prejudice is prejudice," she said, "even if I grew up on the other side of it." Eric exhaled, a slow, thoughtful breath. "I'm glad you came anyway." "Me too." They reached the parking lot. Zoe started making little snow angels beside the sidewalk while the adults talked. "Jade," Eric began, voice quieter, "I noticed, you know." "Noticed what?" "The way you looked around tonight." Jade looked down at her gloves. "It was a lot. I should have prepared you better," he said. "This community, it's beautiful. but it has its walls. Jade lifted her gaze to him. I'm not afraid of walls. No, he said. You're not. He stepped a little closer, not touching, but close enough that his warmth blended into the cold air. Are you okay? He asked. Jade, let the truth settle. Yes, she said. But it made me realize something. What's that? If I'm going to be anywhere near your world, your family, your community, I need to be strong enough for all of it, not just the pretty parts. Eric's expression shifted soft, full of something he didn't quite name. You already are. Jade smiled, but didn't look away. And you? What about me? Are you strong enough too? To stand with me when people talk? To speak up when they judge? The question hung between them, sharper than the cold. Eric didn't answer right away. His silence stretched, a silence full of history, grief, loyalty, fear. Zoe's voice broke the tension. Daddy, look, my snow angel is dancing. They both turned to her arms, flailing, kicking up snow. Eric laughed softly. Jade watched him watching Zoe, a love so deep it scared her how much she wanted to be part of it. After a long moment, he turned back to her. I'm trying, he said finally. I want to be. For you. The words hit deeper than she expected. She nodded, accepting the truth of them. Imperfect, sincere, enough for now. They helped Zoe up from the snow, brushed her coat clean, and moved toward their cars. Hot cocoa at our place tomorrow? Zoe asked, hopeful as a sunrise. Jade looked at Eric. He didn't answer for her, just waited, letting her choose. I'd love that, Jade said. Zoe cheered. They parted with a warmth that lingered long after the cold air had closed around Jade again. But as she drove home, she replayed the night, the whispers, the glances, Grace's measured approval, Eric's hesitation, and she knew, with a quiet certainty settling in her bones, that tonight had changed something. The bridge between their worlds had begun to form. But bridges, Jade realized, didn't just connect. They also revealed the height of the gap beneath them. The next test would come soon, and it would shake all three of them in ways none of them were prepared for. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of winter light that blurred the horizon and made the whole city seem quieter than usual. Jade sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee she kept forgetting to drink, replaying the night at the community center. Grace's steady gaze, the whispers, Eric's hesitation before answering her question. She told herself not to overthink it, but her heart tugged in two directions, one full of warmth, the other full of warning. By late morning, she pulled herself together and headed to school. The hallways buzzed with children still high on post-holiday energy. Their noise usually comforted her, but today it felt like a distant hum she had to walk through. She was organizing lesson plans when her colleague, Martha, peeked into her classroom. Martha was kind, older, the type who baked muffins for teachers' meetings, but today her expression was too curious, too careful. Jade, she said, can I ask you something? Jade felt a small knot form in her stomach. Sure. I heard you were seen in Roxbury last night, Martha said slowly. With a man. And his daughter. Jade blinked. You make it sound like a scandal. No, that's not what I meant. Martha stepped inside and shut the door. I'm just concerned about you. Jade set down her pen deliberately. Martha, what exactly did you hear? Just that you were at a community fundraiser, with a man who's, well, she hesitated. Black. Jade closed her eyes for a moment. And that concerns you, why? I just don't want you to get involved in something complicated, Martha said quickly, almost whispering. Interracial relationships can be very difficult. People talk, parents talk, especially in a school environment. Jade stared at her, a slow, cold wave washing over her spine. I didn't realize caring about someone required community approval. Martha sighed. You're a wonderful teacher. And you're a good woman. I just don't want you dragged into drama. Drama? Jade repeated. Eric is a devoted father who works hard and raises a little girl with more love than most kids ever see. I'm sure he is, Martha said gently. I'm only saying, be careful. People can be cruel when they disapprove. Jade's voice softened, not from weakness, but disappointment. Maybe the problem isn't interracial relationships. Maybe the problem is the people who whisper about them. Martha flushed, murmured an apology, and slipped out the door. Jade sank into her chair, frustration simmering beneath her ribs. It wasn't the first time she'd heard something like this, but it was the first time it mattered this much. As the day went on, she forced herself to stay focused. During recess, she organized games. During reading hour, she listened to two students argue over whose turn it was for the beanbag chair. But she couldn't shake the echoes of last night or this morning. When the final bell rang, she took a long breath and gathered her things. She was supposed to go to Eric's place this evening, hot cocoa with Zoe. The thought brought a small smile to her lips, but also a thread of anxiety she didn't know how to untangle. She was halfway to her car when her phone buzzed. Eric, running a little behind. Can I pick you up in 30? Jade. Of course. Eric. Zoe is bouncing off the walls. She made a sign that says, Welcome, Miss Jade. Jade covered her mouth, breath catching at the sweetness. But before she could reply, a group of parents walked past her in the parking lot. They weren't whispering, but their glances were enough to make her stiffen. Was it real? Or was she imagining it now? When Eric arrived, Zoe pressed her face against the window, waving wildly. Miss Jade! Miss Jade! Daddy said I had to stay buckled, but I can wave like this. Jade laughed, opening the door. Hi, sweetheart. Eric smiled over the console. You okay? Long day, Jade said, sliding in. But I'm good now. They drove through light snow, the city glowing in soft winter blues. When they reached Eric's townhouse, Zoe tugged Jade into the warm living room filled with twinkling lights, children's drawings taped to the wall, and the faint scent of vanilla. Sit here, Zoe pointed to the couch. I'll make the cocoa. Daddy helps, but I'm the boss. Eric leaned in quietly. She takes her cocoa duties very seriously. Jade smiled, trying to let the warmth settle into her bones. This house, this family felt comforting, lived in, full of memories and new beginnings. But beneath it, the knot in her chest still pulsed. When Zoe left the room, Eric sat beside Jade. You seem off, he said gently. Did something happen today? Jade debated, brushing it aside. But honesty felt necessary. People talk, she said softly. At school, at the community center, everywhere. Eric's face tightened, familiar tension she'd seen before. What did they say? That this, us, might be complicated. That I should be careful. That I'm stepping into something difficult. Eric stared at the floor for a moment. I'm sorry. I hate that you have to deal with that. It's not your fault, Jade said. It's just new for me. New how? She hesitated, choosing her words. I've never been the outsider, she said quietly. The one people watch or whisper about. I've been on the other side of it my whole life, and now I'm getting a taste of what you've lived with, and what Zoe might face. And it scares me. Eric exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I should have done more last night, he said. At the fundraiser. When people talked. Jade looked at him, surprised. Eric, I froze, he said. I hate conflict. I always have. And I've spent so many years trying to keep the peace that sometimes I stay silent when I shouldn't. Jade felt something shift in her. I don't need you to fight every battle for me, she said, but I need to know you won't hide from them. Eric lifted his gaze slowly to meet hers. I won't hide, he said quietly. Not from you. Before she could answer, Zoe burst back into the room, carrying 3 mismatched mugs of cocoa, marshmallows overflowing like a sugary volcano. Hot cocoa time, she announced, and Eric let out a breath, the tension melting as Zoe climbed onto his lap. For a few minutes, the conversation softened, stories, silly questions, marshmallow mustaches, but Jade kept returning to the drawing in her mind, to the whispers, to Eric's hesitation, and to the truth forming inside her. She wanted this family. She wanted them with a fierceness that scared her, and that meant she needed answers, hard ones. When Zoe ran off to get her favorite blanket, Jade turned to Eric again. "Can we talk about Lena sometime?" she asked gently. Eric froze, startled. She continued softly, "Not now, not for Zoe to hear. But I need to understand that part of your world too." Eric nodded slowly, something vulnerable passing through his eyes. "I can do that," he said, "when I'm ready." Jade respected that, truly. But as she watched Eric wrap Zoe in her blanket, holding her with a tenderness that softened the whole room, she understood something deep, heavy, and irrevocable. This wasn't just attraction, or chance, or holiday magic. She was falling for him, for both of them, and that meant the stakes were rising fast. Outside, snow began falling again, soft, swirling, relentless. Jade sipped her cocoa, heart full and trembling. She didn't know it yet, but the storm ahead, the one that would shake all three of them, had already started forming at the edges of their quiet little world. Grace Cole lived only 8 blocks from Eric's townhouse, in a small brick home with a wraparound porch and wind chimes that sang even on quiet days. On Saturday morning, Jade found herself standing at Grace's front door, heart thudding under her coat. Eric hadn't asked her to come. Grace had. A simple text that morning, "Come by when you can. I'd like to talk." Polite, direct, impossible to ignore. Jade rang the bell. Grace opened almost immediately, dressed in a soft gray sweater, glasses perched low on her nose, her expression unreadable. "Jade," she said, "come in." The warmth of the house enveloped her. Cinnamon, old wood, framed photographs along the hallway, pictures of Eric as a teenage boy, awkward and lanky, Zoe as a toddler, frosting on her cheeks, Lena. Jade paused. She recognized her instantly from the way people's voices softened when they spoke her name. A beautiful woman with gentle eyes and long braids. Her presence was everywhere, on walls, in frames on the mantel, woven into the home like a heartbeat. Grace followed Jade's gaze. "She was loved," Grace said simply. Jade nodded. "I can see that." Grace motioned toward the living room. They sat Grace in her usual armchair, Jade on the couch, hands clasped too tightly in her lap. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Grace inhaled slowly. "I suppose you're wondering why I asked you here." "A little," Jade admitted. "But I assumed it wasn't for small talk." Grace almost smiled. "You're perceptive." "Good." She folded her hands, her voice steady. "Jade, I watched you at the fundraiser. You handled yourself well, despite what people said or implied." Jade lowered her gaze, recalling the whispers, the judgment flickering in strangers' eyes. "I tried." "You did more than try," Grace replied. "You stayed. And that tells me something about you." Jade felt her throat tighten. "It wasn't easy." "No," Grace said. "It wasn't. And it won't be." Jade looked up, meeting Grace's serious gaze. "Eric is a good man," Grace continued, "but he carries more weight than he allows others to see. And Zoe, well, Zoe loves with her whole heart. She chose you the moment she met you. Children do that. They choose quickly, completely." Jade's chest warmed at the mention of Zoe, but Grace's tone deepened. "Which means they hurt deeply too." Jade nodded slowly. "I would never want to hurt her. I believe you." Grace leaned forward, her voice softer now. "But there is something you need to understand, something Eric won't say because he's too kind, too careful, and because he's still learning how to live without breaking." Jade felt her breath catch, waiting. Grace continued, her words deliberate. "The world has been hard on him, not just because he lost Lena, but because of who he is. A black man raising a daughter alone. People watch him, judge him, expect him to fail." Jade swallowed, remembering the fundraiser, the gym, the parents at school. "He's used to fighting battles you've never had to fight," Grace said. "And if you decide to stand by him, Those battles become yours too. Jade didn't flinch. I know. Do you? Grace asked gently. Knowing and living it are different things. Jade took a breath. Then teach me. Help me understand what he won't say. Grace studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if confirming something inside herself. Very well. She stood and walked to a shelf, returning with a photograph. Eric, younger, maybe 23, holding baby Zoe with exhausted joy in his eyes. After Lena died, Grace began. People did not surround Eric with support the way they would have surrounded other men. Some said he was irresponsible for being a single father. Some said he wouldn't last. Some said he should give Zoe to someone more stable. Jade's eyes widened. They said that? They did, Grace said, and Eric fought every day to prove them wrong. Not with anger, with patience, with work, with love. Jade felt something twist inside her, something fierce, protective. If you step into their lives, Grace continued quietly, you must not hesitate. Halfway love will destroy them. Jade felt the words like a stone dropped into her chest. Heavy, true, terrifying, and yet she felt no urge to run. Instead, she felt clarity settling through her like warm light. I care about them, Jade said softly. I know things are moving quickly. I know it's messy. But I care, deeply. Grace nodded once, satisfied. Good. Because Zoe is already drawing pictures of you in her future. And Eric, well, she paused. He has not looked at anyone the way he looks at you since Lena. Jade's breath caught. She wasn't prepared for that. Not from Grace, not spoken so plainly. I invited you here today, Grace said, because I needed to know whether you understood what loving them would demand. Not perfection, just strength and truth. Jade steadied her voice. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. Grace sat back, the weight of the conversation easing. There is one more thing I need you to understand. Jade braced herself. Eric carries guilt, Grace said quietly. For moving forward, for wanting happiness again. He won't admit it, not even to himself. But it's there. Jade's heart cracked a little at the thought. Don't let his guilt convince you he doesn't want you, Grace continued. He does. He's just afraid wanting anything might betray what he lost. Jade nodded, tears rising unbidden. I can be patient, she whispered. Good, Grace said. He'll need that. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Grace stood, signaling the conversation was over. Now, she said, tone lighter, stay for tea. Zoe will never forgive me if I send you home without offering sugar cookies. Jade laughed softly, wiping the corner of her eye. I'd like that. Tea was warm, cookies were sweet, and by the time Jade left the Cole home, she felt steadier, still overwhelmed, but anchored by a clarity she hadn't had before. She walked down the snowy sidewalk, pulling her coat tight, thinking of Eric, of Zoe, of the drawing taped to her refrigerator. But she couldn't know, that Eric was already wrestling with a storm of his own, a storm of doubts, of whispers, of history, and of fear that loving Jade meant opening himself up to loss again. As Jade stepped into the fading afternoon light, she sensed a shift in the air, something quiet, tremulous, and inevitable. The crisis was coming, the breaking point, and none of them, not Jade, not Eric, not Zoe, were ready for what would happen next. Snow drifted in slow circles outside Jade's apartment window, the flakes tapping faintly against the glass as if urging her to move, to breathe, to do something other than sit frozen on her couch. Grace's words still echoed in her mind about Eric's guilt, Zoe's attachment, the weight of loving a family shaped by loss and judgment. Jade knew she could carry that weight. She felt stronger now, steadier. But she didn't know if Eric felt the same. She didn't know if he believed he deserved happiness again. And that question, unanswered, fragile, sat in her chest like a stone. She didn't have long to dwell on it. Her phone buzzed. Eric, can you come by? Jade frowned. Is everything okay? Eric, I need to talk. It's important. The knot in her stomach tightened. She grabbed her coat and drove through the falling snow. The streets quiet, the stoplights glowing like distant beacons. When she reached Eric's townhouse, the porch light flickered, casting soft shadows across the steps. Eric opened the door before she could knock. He didn't smile. His eyes were tired, shadowed. "Come in," he whispered. Inside, the house felt different. Still warm, still familiar, but quieter. Too quiet. Zoe wasn't in sight. "Where's Zoe?" Jade asked, softly alarmed. "Asleep," Eric said. She was exhausted. He led her into the living room. The drawings usually pinned to the wall were still there, but one, the drawing of the three of them, was missing. Jade noticed immediately. Her heart skipped a beat. "Eric." He sat down heavily on the couch, elbows on his knees. She approached slowly, sitting beside him, giving him space. "I talked to my mom today," he said quietly. Jade felt her pulse pick up. "About us?" "About everything," he said. "About Lena. About moving forward. About Zoe. About you." She swallowed. "Okay." He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaling shakily. "Jade, I'm scared." The words cracked something open inside him, like he'd been holding them in for years. "I'm scared of doing this wrong," he continued. "I'm scared of hurting Zoe. I'm scared of disappointing my mom. I'm scared of losing something again before I even have the right to want it." Jade's breath caught. "Eric, you asked me the other night," he said, interrupting softly. "Are you strong enough? Will you stand with me when people judge?" He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't answer you." "I know," Jade whispered. "You hesitated." He nodded. "And I've been thinking about it ever since. Thinking and thinking. Until my head hurt." She reached for his hand but didn't touch him yet. She waited, letting him choose. "I froze at the fundraiser," he admitted. "I froze because all I could hear were the voices telling me I was irresponsible, that I couldn't protect my daughter, that I couldn't protect Lena, that I couldn't protect anyone. Eric. And when they whispered about you," he continued, voice shaking, "I felt shame." Jade's breath trembled. That hurt, more than she expected. He looked up at her finally, eyes raw, wounded. "Not shame of you, never you. A beat. Shame of myself. Shame that I wasn't strong enough to defend you, that I hesitated, that I've spent years trying not to make waves, trying so hard to keep peace that I forgot how to speak up." Jade swallowed back tears. "You don't have to be perfect," she said softly. "I don't want perfect. I want honest." Eric looked away, jaw tightening. "Zoe drew you in her family picture, and when I realized what she was telling me, what she was asking of me, I panicked. I didn't take it down because I didn't want her to see it. I took it down because I wasn't sure if I deserved the family she was imagining." Jade's heart cracked. "You do deserve it," she whispered fiercely. "You deserve love and peace, and someone who stands beside you. And Zoe deserves someone who shows up, not someone who lives scared." Eric shook his head. "That's the problem. I thought I was ready for you, for this, but when I picture stepping forward, officially, publicly, I still hear the whispers." Jade felt tears prick her eyes. "And when I picture stepping back," he continued, voice breaking, "I hear Zoe crying." Silence settled thick and cold. The snow outside pressed against the windows like a held breath. "Eric," Jade said, voice trembling, "are you saying you don't want this?" His answer came quietly, painfully. "I'm saying I'm afraid I'll ruin it." "You won't," she insisted. He didn't respond. "Look at me," she whispered. Slowly, he did. "I don't need everything from you," she said, "but I need something. I need you to choose, maybe not forever, maybe not loudly, but clearly." Eric's eyes filled. "I want to choose you," he said. "Every part of me wants to. But," she whispered. He closed his eyes. "But I don't know how to be brave enough yet." The sentence sliced through her. She didn't cry, but her body felt suddenly too still, too cold. Jade stood slowly. "I understand," she said, voice soft but steady. Eric stood too, alarm flickering through him. "Jade, wait. I'm not walking away," she said. "But I can't be the only one fighting your fears." "I know," he whispered. She reached for her coat with shaking hands. "Zoe will be heartbroken if she thinks this is her fault," Eric said, voice full of panic. Jade turned to him, pain tightening her chest. "Then you need to tell her the truth," she said gently, "that adults get scared too. But that none of it is because of her." Eric swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose you." "You're not losing me," Jade said. "But you might lose the chance to build something real if you keep hiding from it." They stood in silence, two people who wanted each other deeply, separated not by lack of love but by the weight of fear. Jade put her hand on the doorknob. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not giving up, but you need to meet me halfway." Eric nodded, but she saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the fear, the grief. She stepped outside into the falling snow. He didn't stop her this time. As the door closed behind her, Jade felt something break, not the bond between them, but the illusion that warmth alone could hold back the winter creeping in. Tonight was the fracture. Tomorrow would require healing. But only if Eric found the courage to choose the future he kept telling himself he didn't deserve. Eric didn't sleep. Not really. He drifted between restless dozing and long stretches of staring at the ceiling, the winter shadows shifting across his bedroom walls like ghosts of choices he hadn't made. Down the hall, Zoe slept curled around her stuffed bunny, unaware that anything in her world had cracked. Eric listened to her soft breathing and felt the weight in his chest deepen. He couldn't lose Jade, but he also couldn't pretend he wasn't terrified. When morning finally crept in, gray and cold, he rose quietly, made coffee he didn't drink, and sat on the couch holding the folded drawing he had taken down the night before, the one that had sparked everything. The crayon lines were bright, hopeful, Jade in the center, him on one side, Zoe on the other, my new family. Eric closed his eyes. Fear had stolen so much from him, already stolen years of peace, stolen nights of rest, stolen his ability to imagine a future without loss, crouched in the corner of it. But Jade wasn't asking him to erase his grief. She wasn't asking him to replace Lena. She was asking him to be brave enough to try. And Zoe, his sweet girl, had already placed her heart in Jade's hands. If he let fear dictate his next steps, he wouldn't just lose Jade, he would hurt Zoe in a way she didn't deserve. His mother's voice echoed through him. Silence is a kind of betrayal. Eric stood abruptly. He had a choice to make. No more hiding, no more hesitation. He got Zoe dressed and bundled for the cold. She bounced around the living room, oblivious to the shift inside him. "Daddy, can we go to the park? Or pancakes?" "Pancakes sound good." Eric knelt in front of her, gently tucking a curl behind her ear. "We're going to see Miss Jade." Zoe froze. Now? Is she mad?" Zoe whispered. Eric's heart twisted. "No, sweetheart. She's not mad. Daddy just needs to fix something." Zoe nodded solemnly, as if given a secret mission. "I can help." "You already have," he murmured, kissing her forehead. Snow crunched under their boots as they walked up Jade's apartment steps. Eric hesitated for a single second, but only one before knocking. The door opened slowly. Jade stood there wrapped in a sweater, eyes tired, hair slightly mussed from sleep. She looked surprised and guarded. It pierced him. "Jade," he said softly. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside silently, letting them in. Zoe immediately ran to her and hugged her legs. "Miss Jade," Daddy said, "he messed up and now we're fixing it." Jade froze, looking between them. "Did he?" "Yes," Zoe said proudly, then dropped onto the carpet with her crayons, humming to herself, giving the adults privacy, the way her grandmother had taught her. Eric took a breath. "I'm sorry," he said. Jade didn't speak. She crossed her arms gently, waiting, her eyes steady. "He deserved that. I was scared," he said, "and I still am. But last night, when you walked out, I realized something." Jade's jaw tightened just slightly. "What did you realize?" "That fear isn't protecting me," he said. "It's controlling me, and it's hurting the people I love, hurting you, hurting Zoe, hurting myself." Jade swallowed, her throat working. "Eric." He stepped closer, not touching her yet. "You asked me to meet you halfway," he said. "I'm here, and I'm choosing you. Not because it's easy, not because it's simple, but because it's right." Jade's eyes glistened, but she held still, listening. "I want a future," he said. "With you, with Zoe. A real one, a brave one. I know I didn't show it last night, but I believe we could be something good, something strong." He finally reached out and took her hand. It trembled slightly in his. "But I can't do this alone. I need you with me. And if you'll have me, I will fight for us." Jade let out a soft, shuddered breath. "Eric, I never needed perfection. I just needed you to choose." "I do," he said, voice breaking. "I choose you." She stepped into him slowly, as if giving him time to change his mind. He didn't. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a certainty he hadn't felt in years. Her cheek pressed to his chest, and he whispered into her hair, "I'm sorry I made you doubt it." Jade wrapped her arms around him tightly, letting out the breath she'd been holding since the night before. "Just don't shut me out again," she whispered. "Not when things get hard." "I won't," he promised. "Not anymore." A tiny voice piped up from the carpet. "Are you guys done talking about feelings?" They both laughed, a warm, relieved sound. Zoe stood and held up a new drawing. "I made an updated family picture," she announced proudly. Jade knelt. Eric knelt beside her. In the new drawing, the three of them still held hands, but this time Zoe had added snowflakes in the corners, a Christmas tree, and a big yellow sun in the middle of the sky. Jade smiled through the sting of tears. "It's beautiful. It's our future," Zoe said confidently, as if it were obvious. Jade looked at Eric. "Your daughter is very sure of us." Eric smiled gently. "She gets that from her mother." They spent the morning in Jade's living room drinking cocoa, coloring with Zoe, letting warmth settle where fear had lived before. Later, Eric stepped onto the balcony with Jade as snowflakes landed softly on the railings. He took her hands again. "I love you," he said quietly. The words were simple. Bare. True. Jade felt her heart open wide, wider than she believed it could. "I love you too," she whispered. Eric kissed her, slow, certain, full of a promise he wasn't afraid to make anymore. When they went back inside, Zoe held up her drawing again. "Can we put this on the fridge?" Jade laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Put it right in the middle." Zoe beamed and ran to do it. Eric wrapped an arm around Jade's waist. She leaned into him, eyes soft, full of the future she once thought she'd lost. Christmas lights still twinkled in the windows, a new family, imperfect, stitched together by grief and courage and choice, stood at the beginning of something whole, something bright, something theirs. And as snow fell over the quiet Boston streets, Jade whispered the words she once thought she'd never say again. "This is the future I always wanted."